Start recording. Okay. So last week we did some of the basics of Figma, creating shapes, moving things around, creating a wireframe, nothing too fancy. Today we're going to go more into the design part of it, choosing some typography, doing some colors, creating buttons, stuff. Nothing's going to be interactive yet. That'll be next week when we add all the interactivity to it. So it actually looks kind of cool. But we're going to create all the elements to do that today. So if you were not here last week, because I know some people signed up since then, all students, no matter what educational institution they're a part of, get Figma Professional for free. To do that, you have to go to figma.com and then go to the pricing tab. And then underneath this Figma Professional card, you'll click free for students and educators. And then there'll be this Get Verified button, and we'll click that. And then you will put no account, create one, click the button right there. And then you'll put your USC email and you'll create a password and then click create account. It's best practice to use your USC email just because Figma sees the @usc.edu and will automatically verify that you're associated with USC. And then once you do that, you'll get some emails sent to your USC email, verify your email, start your account, all of that stuff. But today we're just going to jump right in. So why don't we open up our project? So I went to myfigma.com and I named it Figma Workshop. I can find it in my files. And so this should seem familiar. We did this last week, but today we're going to do some new stuff. Now, I want to organize them in a little bit of a different way. I mentioned this last week where I use pages to organize different parts of the design process. So this one was our wireframe page. And you can actually expand your pages by clicking this page 1 dropdown. And then if you want to rename it, you can just double click into the title and then name it. So I'm going to put wireframe in here. So I know that when I click this, I'll see all my wireframe. Now I need a new page for today where we're going to do our mockup. So I'm going to click on the plus button in the pages section. And then I'm going to type mockup. Now you'll notice we're on a new page. All of our layers went away. You don't see them anymore. Those all are, sorry, those are all located on the wireframe page. But we're going to use the mockup today. Now, the settings that we did for this grid style that we did last week are already there. So those are for your file. So when you create these different styles, those will carry through all of your pages and you can easily access them. You can also, with this kind of blank slate, add new styles from here. So if your kind of real world application, if you're starting a project and you're like, I know my brand uses these text styles, these colors, you can add them from right here. So we can do that right now. So with this local style section, you'll click the plus button. And it'll give you an option for the 4 different types of styles that you can create in Figma. We're going to start with text. So let's click text. And then it'll put you in the name field. So this is where you will name your style like we did over here, where it says 4 columns, 16 pixel margin. You can name it whatever you want. Again, I like to use descriptive names so that when I'm looking at my styles or someone else's, they know what it's used for. So I'm going to do this for screen title. So this is going to be the text that I'm going to put on top of my screen that says menu or locations so that we have a consistent style across. Then all of these properties are those different type settings that you can choose. This first one where it says enters the default font for Figma. You can pick whatever you want. I'm going to choose one called Outfit. And the nice thing about fonts in Figma is they are based off of Google fonts. So if you search up like Google fonts and go to their webpage, which I can actually do right now. All of these fonts are going to be in Figma by default. So if you want to see how they look before you start playing around in Figma, you can just look at Google fonts. Then this, where it says regular, this is going to be basically how bold or how thin your font is going to be. So the font weight. I'm going to use semi-bold for the screen title. Where it says 12, this is your font size. I'm going to put 32. Just so it's a bit bigger. It's a title, it should be bigger. Right here, auto is going to be your line height. So when you have a set of text that goes across multiple paragraphs, this is going to be how tall each line is. And then there's letter spacing over here. So if you want all of your letters to be kind of close together, you can leave it like this. If you want them to be a little bit more spread out, you can add a letter spacing percentage. I'm going to keep it like this. And then this is paragraph spacing. So before where line height determined each line, paragraph spacing is going to determine each paragraph. But I'm going to keep all of these like this. You can click on the three-dot menu here to see a bunch of more different font settings. You can determine if you want everything to be uppercase or if you want them to be title case, if you want everything to be underlined or striked through. There's some more in the details if you want it to be subscript or superscript, but we're going to keep these all similar. We're going to go kind of some basic font choices today. So then I'm going to click create style. And you can see it's populated right over here in our text styles.
When you post that text style
Mm-hmm.
for the letter spacing,
I do 0. That's pretty standard.
default.
Yeah, the default. The default will be like when you type in like Microsoft Word or the Google Docs, that's the default 0. But you can add more if you want it to be spaced out more. All right. I'm going to add another text one here. This one, I'm going to do body text as the name because this is going to be when I'm writing any kind of copy that says, we have a new thing, all the paragraph spacing of the paragraph text. That'll be body text. I'm going to change the font to Roboto, if that's how you pronounce it. I'm not quite sure. And I just picked random fonts, by the way. And then I'm going to keep this at regular. And then I'm going to actually change it to 16 for the font size, just so it's a little bit bigger than 12. I find 12 to be a little small, especially on like screens like a phone and even on the web, 12 is kind of small. And I'm just going to click create style. You'll notice in the text styles that the little icon kind of tries to emulate what your properties are a little bit. So that's kind of cool. And then we're also gonna add a color style. So again, press the plus button and click color. Now we're gonna be doing kind of like a coffee shop app is kind of the vision for this. It's going to be called Capriccio Coffee. It's a random Italian word for some musical thing. You can call it whatever you want. You don't have to try to spell this if you don't want to. And then that's in the name. And then there's all of these properties for your color. So if you click this gray text or this gray box, you'll open up your color picker. And there's a bunch of ways you can pick the color, kind of like how we explored. You can change it in this kind of gradient box. You can change the hue in this slider. If you already have the color in your canvas, you can use the color picker. This is changing the transparency. We're going to use this down here. So I'm going to actually change RGB to hex. These are just different ways that designers kind of put some numbers and letters to a color, so it's consistent across different things. And the one that I'm going to be using, the hex code is 355E3B. You can do anything you want. Yeah. And then when you press enter, it'll take your color picker right there. And you'll see it up here. You can also add additional kind of color properties if you want by clicking on the plus button. So if you wanted to add like a transparency to it, it does that automatically, but I'm just going to go with this straight color, nothing too crazy. And then I'm going to click create style. And then I'm going to do one more color style before we do some fun stuff. So I click the plus and then click color, and I'm going to name this one hover green, just because I'm going to use this color. You'll see it kind of more in action next week, where you can hover over an element and it's going to change to this color green instead of the other one. That's not really going to be a thing in mobile design because you can't really hover over your phone and it recognize it, but I want to show you for like web design purposes. And this one, you can again choose whatever color you want, but this hex code is 6AC377. And then click create style. And again, you can see those colors over here in the little circle, so you can kind of differentiate them yourself. All right. So something that Figma has, similar to a bunch of different design apps, is plugins. Plugins add additional functionality that Figma does not have baked in. And some other companies will develop plugins for Figma itself. So the first one that we want to do is going to be called Unsplash. So if you go to, I right-clicked here, but you can also find it by going to this Figma icon and this plugins. I already have it installed, but you can just click this find more plugins. And then if you search for Unsplash, and then you can run it. Now, what Unsplash is it's similar to different like stock image places. But the fun thing about Unsplash is that all of the photos in here have been like donated by the photographers. So there's not like all those copyright laws that you have to be wary of. Yes. So again, we're going to be doing some coffee shop stuff. So if I were to just search coffee shop and then press enter or press the search, it gives me 10,000 results for coffee shop images that I am free to use. And all you have to do with Unsplash is just click and drag the image into your canvas and it'll be placed in there. It'll be very big. So if you hold down your space bar and then you press the minus button, you can zoom out, or the plus button to zoom in. And remember to hold space bar and click and drag to move around your canvas. And then you can resize this however you want. I'm just going to make it smaller so it's easier to work with. I'm going to hold down Shift when I'm doing this, clicking and dragging, because that way the height and the width stay proportional to the original size. So I'm not kind of distorting anything. I'm just going to make it quite a bit smaller. And then zoom back in. Shift. Yeah. All right, the other plugin that we're going to use is called Iconify. Iconify has a bunch of already pre-designed icons that we can use, just simpler than designing our own icons. So again, if you right-click in the canvas or you go to the Figma button, go to plugins, find more plugins, and you can just search Iconify. It's this one with a smiley face. And then you'll click run. And it's very similar to Unsplash. You just gotta search for whatever you're looking for. The last one I searched for was a check mark, which we'll probably use. But you can search for if you wanted a home screen icon, and then you can pick the one that you kind of like or stuff like that. It's a plugin. So you'll want to go Figma, icon, plugins, find more plugins, and search for Iconify. And then run, and then you can search for whatever icon you want. I'm going to use this one, but you can use whatever one you want. And again, you just click and drag. These ones are pretty small compared to the Unsplash images, but that's fine. All right. So my vision is that I'm going to use this image that we took from Unsplash as our background image. When you boot up the app for the first time, there's going to be a loading screen, and I want it to have this background image similar to how we set in our wireframe, where I put this image wireframe and then the logo on top. We're going to recreate that now using an actual image and logo. So again, we need that frame. So you'll click on the frame icon or F on your keyboard. And then we're using the iPhone 14 Pro frame. And I just clicked it to place it in here. And then I'm going to double click in the name so that I can rename it. And again, I'm going to name this one loading screen, just like we did with the wireframe.
How do you
Command Z to undo.
Oh.
So now I need to place my image within the frame itself. And that's as simple as clicking on the image and dragging it onto the frame. You'll notice that once I do that, the rest of the image gets a little cropped. And that's because the frame is only going to show you what's in its confines, what's in its borders. So I might need this to be a little bit bigger, actually. So I'm going to, again, just shift, click, and drag up so that I have something that covers the whole loading screen. That's kind of nice.
How do you get to the
Yeah, so it's frame icon,
Oh,
and then it's right there. So the nice thing about Unsplash is that the pictures are really crystal clear, but I'm going to actually blur it out. It's going to be in the background. I don't want it to be the center of attention. And so we can do that with effects. So Figma has effects just like Photoshop or an Illustrator and the other design tools that you've used. If you just want to click on your image And then down over here, there's the effects section. And this is in the design tab. And you'll click on the plus button. And by default, there's a drop shadow, which we'll use in a little bit. But if you click on drop shadow, you can change it to layer blur, which is what we're going to use. Layer blur is just going to blur out the entire selection. The other one, background blur, is when you're going to use something on top and you want everything beneath it in this layers panel to be blurred out. But layer blur is pretty easy to use. So I just clicked layer blur. If you want to change some of the blur settings, you just got to click on this like little sun icon, is how I would describe it, to the left of it. And there's only one setting you can change, and that's your blur radius. So this is essentially how blurred out it is going to be. The higher the number, the stronger the blur. But right now it's at 4, but if I were to put it to like 40, it's like terrible. So we don't want it to be too strong. Now, if you notice when I'm hovering over the B, I get the two-way arrows. That's how you can click and drag to move the setting. So I'm gonna make it like not super blurred out, maybe like a 3. You can still see what it is, but it's not too strong. And then next, I'm going to place my image for the logo. I want to make sure that when I'm placing it and moving it around, that I'm placing it exactly where I want it on the screen. So if you click on the loading screen title, and then over here in the design tab for layout grid, I'm going to click on the 4 button, the 4 square button. And then I can pick that grid style that we created last week for those who were here last week. So now I can see some red lines that I can kind of better position my logo. And yeah.
So I choose layer blur and then.
What do you mean?
It won't blur.
Yeah.
In my wireframe, it looks normal, like the stripe, but then when we do mockups, the stripe is so like weird. The stripe, the white stripe is like so skinny, like this, but then in the wireframe, it's normal. And I saved it as it's just, it looks so weird. And this is more than just it.
I don't know why this would be there with 2,000 something pixels, height 5,000 something, and over here,
So when you change it to the same.
Yeah, so if you use iPhone 14.
I think I use Pro, which is like Pro.
Yeah. So that's why, because your frame is so big.
Oh, I use Pro and then I dragged it, because
Yeah.
this is too small, so I dragged it out.
Yeah, so essentially what you did is you're designing for something that's like 3,000 by 5,000 pixels. So you have to zoom in to.
So you mean like this?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So, I will just change the width and the height and see if it will go back, or do you want me to redo it?
You can either redo it or you can change it. Your picture will still be super big. So when you're scaling down your picture, make sure you're only picking the picture and not the frame as well. So when you're clicking on it, only click on this picture and then click and drag, because otherwise you're scaling the frame at the same time, which is why you have to click.
All right. So I'm going to place my logo image. I think if you RSVP'd, I tried sending everyone an email that had an attachment of that image. If you didn't get that for some reason, you can pick a random image if you want, or you can just kind of skip this part. So under the shape tools, which is this rectangle, if you click the down arrow, there's place image / video. So we'll click place image and it'll bring up something in your Finder, or if you're using Windows, it's like your start menu or something. I don't remember. File Explorer. I can't remember what it's called. Yeah, so I clicked on the title of the frame to select the frame. And then over here, I clicked on the 4-dot menu by layout grid.
I don't have that one. I don't have the phone.
You don't have the what?
Yeah, you have to click the frame. So click the loading screen title. And then go over here to the layout grid. And then click the down.
Okay. So I'm going to place the image. So I'm just going to select it and click open and allow me to place it wherever. I'm going to just place it right here. Nice and big. So I'm going to just kind of scale this down a little bit again by holding down Shift and then clicking and dragging to make it a little bit smaller. Let's say somewhere around like 250. And then I'm just going to click and drag it onto the frame itself. And I need to reapply my grid. I can see where it is. No, that's a little too small. Okay, I'm going to bring it back up.
How did you drag the? I was really behind. How did you drag it into?
I just clicked it and dragged it into the frame.
Did you try to open it from Figma?
So I went down arrow, place image / video, and then put it in there. I'm just going to make sure it's completely centered. I'm just moving it around till I see those red lines. Now, if I turn off my grid, which you can do by clicking on the frame and then just clicking this eye icon, that doesn't remove it. It just lets you not see it for a little bit so you can kind of see how it looks. Can't really see the logo that great because of the colors and whatnot. So I'm just gonna do a quick little thing of adding like a colored shape behind it so that it has some contrast. So again, I'm going in the shape tools, clicking down at the drop down, and I'm gonna just pick a ellipse because that's the shape of the logo. I'm gonna click somewhere up here and then hold down Shift and drag so that it's bigger than my logo. It's gonna cover it for now, but we'll move it down. Something like that. And again, I'm gonna move this so that it's perfectly centered in our frame. You could have also used these align vertical and horizontal centers that we did last week. I'm going to change the fill, which I'm just doing down here, this color box. I'm going to move it to white. And then there's a couple ways you can move it back in the layers. You can either click over here where it says ellipse and just drag it underneath that logo image and it'll move it down. You can also right click on the shape. And then there's going to be, maybe I lied, maybe don't do that. Yeah.
Oh, I see it. You apply the blur effect to your entire frame. Yeah, so anything you put on the frame is done. So you can click on that image over here, and that makes sure that you're on it.
Yeah.
Somehow the circle is not solid, like this is not right?
That's all.
Okay, because I'm seeing like a white thing, but then for me, I'm still seeing the background. Like I'm seeing the stripes, the background, you know.
Stripes are always gonna be there.
Okay.
Unless if you turn them on.
So like how I did up here, when I had it selected, I can turn these off.
Why we put it in the first place?
So that you can see where you're placing things in a layout. Because if I were to not have this, and I were to have multiple elements on the screen, I might not know exactly where I want to place them, you know?
But then you will always see the red line, right?
Yeah. So you can also click on the circle and use Command and then the brackets, which look like, let me type it out. It look like this. Make that a little bigger. So this one will send it backwards. So if I command bracket, it'll send it behind. If I do it too far, you can do the other bracket, the flip of it, to bring it forward. All right.
So I have to drag the logo above. Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. The like moving it forward and backward. Yeah. So that is, if you hold Command, oh gosh, plus this bracket, This will send it backwards by 1 layer. This one will bring it forwards 1 layer. Yeah, a transparent border.
Yeah, like, the contour cut image should have been black line. See?
So this is, I made this logo as an image. So I just put it as a black border, but like when you're designing like a logo, it's you can do that in a different program. All right, so once the loading screen has, done its job, the app is loaded, it's going to bring us to a page where we're going to log in or we're going to register. So we're going to need some buttons for that, and we're going to make those first. We're going to cover a kind of complicated topic, so I'm going to try to take my time and explain it as best as I can. Figma offers this thing called components, and they are reusable pieces of design that you're creating that you can place elsewhere in your designs. And then once you change stuff in your what's called the master component, it'll push all of those changes to everywhere else you have that in your design. So if you were to have a button and you were to put it to a green background like we're going to do, but then you decide, I hate that green, I want it to be blue. You can change the master component to be blue, and it'll change every other instance of that button. So first we're going to create the button itself. So we are going to use our rectangle tool, which is under the shape section. It's right here. You can also press R on your keyboard. And you can just click and drag on our canvas. I don't care what size it is because I'm going to specify it over here. So I let go of my rectangle. I'm going to change my width to be 218 pixels. Again, you can do whatever you want. I'm changing the height to 61. Now this looks kind of just like a block. Not the most inviting thing, kind of, early design stuff with pretty blockish, but modern design has a lot of rounded borders, right? So you can achieve that by doing this corner radius. So if you select your rectangle, this thing with an arc right here, you can select how curved you want the corners to be. So the higher the number, the more curved they're going to be until you can't curve them anymore. So if I were to just put like 10, I'm going to zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. You'll see a little bit of, curving. If you want to make some fun designs that aren't perfectly symmetrical, you can click on this 4 kind of circle-ish corner and then specify each individual corner. So it's going to go top left to top right to bottom right to bottom left. So it's in a clockwise circle. I'm just going to click that same button again. I'm going to keep it standard. I'm going to put this at 30 so that it looks a little bit more modern and rounded.
Oh, the angle?
Yes, that's right over here. I'm also going to change the fill color because I think this gray is really boring. I'm going to change it to that green color that I specified before. So with my rounded rectangle selected, under fill, I'm gonna click the 4-dot menu and it'll give me my styles. I'm gonna pick this Capriccio green. That's gonna be my brand's green. And now I can see it kind of in a button.
Because for our computer,
Mhm.
if we try something, it doesn't look like that.
What do you mean?
Like the corner is like only a little bit. It's like this. It's because you have a bigger screen.
It might be. I'm also zooming in. It could be the size of your rectangle. There's a lot of reasons why it could be. Now it looks a little standard, and I want to make it look like it's clickable. We can do that with an effect called the drop shadow. So if I select my rectangle and I go over to my effects again and click the plus, and drop shadow is the default one. So you'll notice like it's a little hard to tell, but there's a little bit of this shadow underneath it. So it looks like it's a bit above the canvas that it's on. If I were to click on this sun icon, I get the properties for it. Here I can change where that shadow is set. So I can play around with where the lighting is maybe coming from. And I can change the color, I can change how strong it is, all of that stuff. So I am going to I'm going to move it on the x-axis, which is the horizontal one, left and right. I'm going to put 4, and you'll notice it shifted it a little bit over to the right. I'm going to keep the y at 4, which means that it's going to be kind of 4 pixels below. So x is 4 pixels to the right, y is 4 pixels below. B is going to be that blur radius again. So the stronger you have it, the more kind of blurred out it's going to be. Or you can have it 0 and have it look like a really kind of funny shadow. But I'm going to put it at 6, just so it looks a little bit more blurred out than normal. S is going to be the spread. So this is just how it goes every which way. We're not going to set this, but just so you can see what it looks like, the more I increase the spread, the more it goes every way. But it doesn't really look great in this case. So I'm going to set that back to 0. And this black with the 25% transparency, I think looks pretty good as a shadow. But you can play around with it if you want to be more fun. And now I'm going to add some text over it so that we know what clicking the button will do. But I'm going to put some boilerplate text right here. It's not going to indicate anything. So I'm going to click the T icon. And then I'll just click wherever. And I have a really intense font thing because I was showing the stuff before. But I'm just going to put in like text, something very generic. And I'm going to change just the text styling to be outfits. Again, you can do whatever you want with this. Just try to make the text within the button and make it appear nice. I'm going to do it as semi-bold. I'm going to put it at 20. And then I'm also going to change the fill to white, just so it pops a little bit more. Now you can save the text style from here as well. So I know I'm going to create a lot of buttons. I want all of them to have standard text styling. With the text box selected, you click the 4-dot menu by text. Click the plus icon. And this is where you can set its name. So I'm just going to call this button text. And then if you want to click show more options, this will just have you be able to control different properties as well. But we already set the text to how we want it, so we don't have to do any of that. But if you want to, you can. And I'll click create style. And now if I want the text to be perfectly centered within the rectangle, I can select both. Having the text box already selected, I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the rectangle. And you'll see that they're both highlighted over here in the layers panel. I know that they're both selected. Over here, we have our align horizontal centers button. This will make sure that they are centered up and down. And then this one over here is your align vertical centers. And that makes sure it's centered. Oh, I got the other one wrong. This one is up and down centered. The other one was left and right. So now that's exactly how I want it to be. So I'm gonna highlight them both. I'm gonna Command G to group them. You can also, with them selected, go to the Figma icon, object, and then it was group selection. Right now it's ungroup because I already made it a group. And then I'm gonna name this sample button.
Where can we find all of the text style?
So you can find it by, if you click outside of anything, they'll be there. You can also click and select a text box and you'll see it over here. All right, so now we're gonna make the component itself. It's pretty easy to get started, and then it gets a little tricky. So if I select my group, this sample button, I can click on it in the layers panel. And then there's this kind of diamond icon on the top. And that's create component. And when I click that, you'll notice that the text and there's a border and it's purple. This lets you know that it's going to be a reusable component now. The first nice thing about it is that it appears in your assets tab. So if I click on assets, you'll notice I have my sample button. Now, if I wanted to place that in a separate part of my design, all I have to do is click and drag it onto the canvas and it's there. This is what's called an instance. So this is the component itself, but every time you copy and drag it somewhere else, those are all instances. So essentially like a child button, a child element. So now if I were to go to this master component is what it's called, and I were to, you don't have to do this, but I'm gonna change the color to this hover green, it's gonna change my other one. And that's because this is an instance of this component. So when I change this, this is also gonna change. We all good so far?
Wait, so how do you make it so that they don't change colors on the video?
Yeah, so you do that by creating it as a component. So if I'm gonna just undo. So right now I created my button. And when I select the group that has all the button stuff, I click this diamond icon on the top, and that makes it as a component. So now when I go to the assets tab, I can see that component here, and I can click and drag it somewhere else to place it elsewhere in the design. I can do whatever changes I want to do to this instance. If I were to double click in here and change this green, it's not going to change the other one because this is not the original component. This is like a copy of it. But if I were to go and change the original it's going to change. Well, now because I changed the instance, it did that. But if I didn't change anything about it, like if I were to do this, it's going to do it. Yeah. All right.
Like, how do I, like bold or like adjust this?
Yeah, so if you select the text, right now it's my style, but if I were to get rid of it, this like second option is where you change it to bold or thin. That's right here.
Wait, text.
If you have a text style already attached to it, but you want to change it, you have to remove it. Okay. Yeah.
How do you change the color?
Yeah, so I just went in and selected my rectangle, and then I just changed the color style. But if I were to remove my color style, you see I have no fill now, but I can just add a new color. You're welcome. Okay. So now also a nice thing about components that this is the tricky part, is you can have variants of a component. So variants are going to be when you want a reusable component, but it's going to be placed in different contexts. So I'm not going to put this button everywhere and that just says text and nothing in it. I'm going to create variants of it that say login or register, all of that stuff. So if I were to click on my component, and you can notice that the whole component is selected, that diamond icon is now replaced with a new one that is still a diamond but has a plus in the center. And this is how you can add a variant. There's a reason that I created this off of a canvas because it gets a little funny when you look at it. So when I click add variant, it's going to add another one right below it. Over here in the design tab, it says current variant. And this is where you can start naming different properties and stuff and creating different values. So for example, you might have a button that has 5 different texts across your design. It has different states when it's being hovered over or when it's clicked. It could be, check boxes that are unchecked or checked or something like that. And this is where we're going to do that. So I'm going to change my property 1. If I double click in here, I can rename it. And I'm going to just put it as text. And this is going to be my property that determines what text is shown in my button. Over here where it says variant 2, I'm going to double click in there so I can change this. And I'm going to type login because I'm going to use this as my login button. Yeah, so if you have your component selected, you click this button up here, this add variant button.
Yeah.
And then there'll be another one created.
Oh.
So now I need to change the actual text so that Figma knows when it has this property of text set to login, that it's going to change the text in it itself. So if I were to double click in my variant and double click in the text box, I can change the text to say login. And I can click outside so that I'm selecting the whole text box again. And I'm going to align it centered. So I'm going to use my align horizontal centers, my align vertical centers. So that's perfectly centered. We're going to do this 2 more times we're going to do it for the register button and the continue as guest button. So again, I'm going to select my whole component, and I can either add a variant from up here, or you can see I can add one down here as well. So either one works. When I select this variant now, I'm going to change the text property where it says, now it says text 3. I'm going to change it to say register. And then remember, you still have to go in and change the actual text. And I'm going to align it centered again. So I clicked this plus button to add a new variant. I clicked on the variant itself, changed the value for the text property, and then I double clicked in till I got to edit the text and changed it to register. So let's do that one more time for the continue as guest button. So I clicked add variant. I'm changing the property value to say continue as guest. I'm double clicking inside my text box to change the actual text itself to continue as guest. I'm going to align that centered. So now I got all of these nice variants. So now let's put them into action. So I'm going to go back to my loading screen frame. I'm going to click on where it says loading screen. You can also click on the frame in the layers panel. I'm going to hold down the Option key. You can also hold down the Alt key if you're on PC. And I'm going to click and drag, so I'm making a copy of it, like we did last week to create new frames. I'm going to rename this to be login screen or launch screen. Well, this isn't a login screen, so we'll do launch screen. Well, this isn't the first thing you see. We'll do account access screen. You can name it whatever you want. I'm just being a little nitpicky. So now I want to make room for my buttons. Yep, you click on the title of the frame, you hold down your Option key, and then you click and you drag it.
Oh.
So I'm going to click on my my logo, and then I'm actually going to go over here in the layers panel, and I'm going to shift and click on my circle underneath my account access screen, so that I'm selecting both, and I'm just going to click and drag to move it up. I need to make room for my buttons.
Wait, so is it control or how do you select both?
I selected one, and then I held down shift and I selected the other. You can also do command and click. So now components give us that nice assets tab that we can put in our text, our button. So I'm going to click and drag to drop it, and I'm going to just find it to be centered. But you'll notice that it says text. You can easily change that to any of your other button variants by going over here where it says sample button. And then if you click where it says default, you can change it to any of the other values that you created. So I'm going to click login, and it's automatically going to change the text to login. I can click register, and it's going to change it to the register button. So that's the benefit of using, one of the benefits of using components and variants is that you don't have to then recreate this and then recreate it again. You can duplicate it, change the name and stuff, but this way things are pretty standardized. So I'm clicking and dragging my sample button again down to text. So I'm changing the value to register. I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to find where it's the same. You'll notice as I'm kind of moving it around, I'm seeing all these red, orange lines. When I move it to where the pixels are the same between my buttons, it'll tell me how much they are. That's where you see that 36, maybe a little small.
It's not, I think they changed the size of the text box. Like, it was text and then I changed login and then like, it won't stay on the same line.
So if you have it like over here, but it's still in that same group over here, you can just click the align center buttons.
No, but like, it's like, when I type login, the last letter goes to a second line, like it, and then I try to move the size of the text box, it won't move.
If you click on the text box and then on the border,
It's mine don't work. Well, that's much easier.
all right. So I'm going to change this last variant to be my continue as guest. And then now I have two kind of cool looking screens already. Any more questions before we keep going? Yeah,
Sorry about that. I like. opening this to play.
that's fine. Do you have the component created with the variants? So under the assets tab, you'll see the main component then. And then you can just click and drag it to wherever you want it to be. And then over here on the right-hand side, you can change the value to one of the variants that you created. All right. So we're not going to create we're not going to create both a login and a register. We're just going to create the login one because they're pretty similar. But what you can do now is I'm going to add a new frame by clicking the frame icon and clicking iPhone 14 Pro. And then I'm going to move it to just look a little bit nicer with the other ones. Now I'm going to double click in here and I'm going to call this login so that I know that this frame is for the login page. And then I want to also have text that says login because, you know, users can get a little turned around in apps and websites and stuff. So you want to always have a title that's saying what's happening. So if I click on the T for text, I can just click and I'm going to type login. Now, when I click outside of it, it's going to select the text box as a whole. And where it says button text, I'm going to want it to be the actual title that screen title that we made. So I'm going to click this unlink button, this detach style. Click on the 4 dots that replaced it, and then find my screen title. It's not that much bigger, but it's something.
Wait, how do I change it?
So if you have a style applied, you need to detach it,
Mhm.
and then you can change the size or choose a different style. So I had this one before. I can remove it, and then I can manually change the size if I wanted. Or choose a different style. And then I'm going to change the fill. I'm going to click the 4 dot style menu so that it's our Capriccio green. And then this is where those grids are going to come in handy for organizing your content. So when I click on the login page,
Is it the building or?
yeah. And then I'm going to apply my layout grid by clicking the 4 square menu, and then my 4 column, 16 margin, 16 gutter. And so now this is helpful because I'm not just putting things in the center now. So I can click in, oops. If I click in and select the text, you'll notice that it will snap to some of these margins. So you can put it where you want. I'm going to put it right up by this left margin, and I'm going to put it down a little bit because we're going to use this as an overlay. So you don't want there to be like chopped off at the top.
Right. Do I have to click out in order to find the layout?
So yeah, you have to click on the frame,
Oh,
and then you can apply a layout to that.
yeah.
So now I'm also going to click on the T icon again. We're going to put a username title field. It has my screen title. If you click out, get in the habit of clicking out after you're typing, because then it selects the whole text box, and any settings that you apply will apply to all of the text within it. If you keep the cursor in there and you change some stuff, you won't see anything. So I'm going to detach my style so I can make some changes. I'm going to keep it at outfit, but I'm going to change the font weight to medium instead of semi-bold. I'm going to change 32 to 24. And again, I'm going to move this to align it with that left margin. Somewhere like there. I'm going to use a rectangle again. I'm going to click and drag to make sure that it's the width of my margins. So it's going from the left part of the left margin to the right part of the right margin. And give it enough space that you can see the text within it. Now with the rectangle selected, I'm going to remove my fill. So under fill, there's going to be this minus icon because I want it to be empty inside, but I still want you to see that there's a field. So that's where this stroke comes in. A fill is the color within the element, while a stroke is essentially the border. So if I click on the plus icon, you'll notice that it gives me kind of a default. You can change the color in here, which I'm going to change ours to that green. So I can click on this style, change it to the Capriccio green. Here's where you can determine where the lines are based out of. So each element is going to have a border. If you click on inside, it's a little bit of math, but if you were to have inside, it's going to count from the borders in. So if you have an element that's like 50 pixels wide and you choose a stroke that is inside 4, it's going to have 50, 49, 48, and 47 colored in. Center is going to distribute it even between the inside of the element and the outside, and outside is going to add it to the outside. So if I were to, I'm going to just demonstrate this quick. I'm going to create 3 rectangles so you can see it. I'm going to add my stroke. It's inside, so you'll notice if I remove my stroke, you can see this pixel border, but when I add the 1 pixel inside, it's going to take the outermost pixel. If I were to keep on adding, it's going to keep on going inwards. If I were to do center, it's a little bit of a different story. So before, where this whole pixel was filled in with gray, now half of it's gray, and the other half is the inside part of the border, and then there's a half of a pixel outside. But when I change this so that it's more, it expands both ways. And then outside, as you can probably guess, we'll keep my shape the same and then only add on the outside. I generally use inside just because when I'm putting elements and I'm selecting the pixels, I'm thinking of how large I want it to be, and I don't want to keep adding stuff on the outside to confuse it. So inside is pretty standard. I'm going to change this to be 2 so that it's a little bit bigger and you can see it. You can either click on the these lines and click and drag for it, or you can type it. What do you mean?
The grid. Because mine was really close to the edge. For some reason.
So it depends. If it's on the edge, it's the margins. So in grid styles, I can click this to customize my style. I can click here for the properties. And then margins is what determines this right here. And then gutters at the in-between.
Maybe it's because your screen is your own screen, because I had the same setting.
Yeah, but also like I'm using the similar size laptop screen to you. So this is just the same screen just blown up by a projector. And I'm also going to change the corner radius on this to make it a little bit more modern. I'm going to click and drag. I clicked on the rectangle, everyone. And then I'm going to click and drag to be where I want it to be. Something like a text entry box should kind of look like a box still, not like the rounded circles we've been doing. So I'm going to do about 10 for my corner radius. And then we want there to be some sort of text in here that determines what the person should be entering in. It's pretty standard with search boxes, is that there's text that's saying what you should be searching, what you should be entering, something like that. You already do have this username field, so it kind of does a similar thing, but we're just going to be safe and add some text in there anyways. So I'm clicking the T icon. I'm going to click inside, and I'm going to just direct them to enter not their password, username. And I'm going to click outside so I can select the entire text box. And I am going to change this from medium to light. I'm going to change the font size to 16, so it's a little smaller. I'm also going to change the fill down here. And I'm just going to type in 656565. That's just a type of gray that's a little bit grayed out, so it's not too jarring, but you can put whatever you want. Yep, so when you select the rectangle, it's this corner radius setting. So the higher the number, the more curved it's going to be.
It won't show. Like when I, oh. I have to double click.
Oops. So you can, I'm going to group these two together. So I'm going to click on my text box, hold Shift, click on my rectangle, Command G. And then I'm going to go back in to the text layer and specifically select that. I did that by opening the group and clicking in the layers panel. It's a little bit easier than trying to double click in the element itself. And then I'm going to make sure that the vertical centers are centered, and it looks like it was already. Nothing changed. So now I'm going to make things a little bit easier. I'm going to select my whole group. I'm going to hold down Shift, select the username text, and I'm going to Alt or Option click and drag so we can duplicate the whole thing at once.
What's the one? What?
My group one is the username entry field. I'll just change that. Group 2 is now going to be the password entry field. So my group 1 was the enter your username text and the rectangle around it. And then I'm just going to change these texts so that they say password instead of username. So I just double clicked in the text box, wrote password. And then I'm going to also click in here, delete the username and put password. So I'm going to go back to my master component. I'm going to just use this and create another variant that says submit so that we have a submit button. If you go into the component and you click one of the variants, you can also create a variant from that. It'll still be within the same component set, but this way you don't have to like do a bunch of different changes. You know, if you start with a very basic component and then you're going to keep adding more stuff, this way you don't have to add things multiple times. I'm going to change this to submit over here under current variant. And I'm going to double click within here and write it as submit.
You add one more, right?
Yep.
You add one more.
I added one more. Then I'm going to make sure it's centered. And then when I go over here, I can click on my assets tab again. I still have my sample button component. I can click and drag it within, find the center with that orange line in the middle. And then I'm gonna go over here where it says default. I'm gonna change it to our new submit variant. So I clicked in our component, drug it onto the frame, moved it around till I found the center, and then changed the text property to the new submit one that we created.
Also, you have to create one.
Yes. Okay. So now I'm intending for this frame to be used as an overlay, which means when someone clicks login, it doesn't navigate them to a new screen, but instead shows kind of like a pop-up for them. This, however, is the size of this frame. So when you click it, if it pops up, it's going to look like you just navigated to the other thing. So when you click on the login name, you can also click on the frame over here. It'll give you the option to resize it. And I'm gonna do so. I'm actually gonna just select it. And then over here on the height, you can also change it so that you don't mess around with the width on accident. So something, whatever you want, as long as its height is smaller than the other frame.
Why are you making it smaller?
So next week when we do prototyping, I'm gonna have it like just a design choice. When you click login, it's gonna show like a pop-up of a login instead of navigating you to a completely new screen.
But if mine takes up the whole page, will that be fine?
That's fine, you just
Or
won't
it
see
will
the
be
effect.
right?
No, it won't.
It's okay.
So if you keep yours that size, and then you do the prototyping next week, the way that we do it, it'll just essentially look as if you went to a screen of the same size. All right. So now we're gonna do, we're gonna skip ahead a little bit to something that we did not get the chance to wireframe last week, and that is our menu. How we're gonna do the menu, I'm actually going to open up, I did a test project before this workshop to see if, just kind of like play around with it. So how we're gonna do it is that kind of looks like this. So you have images in these circles. And then if I'm gonna show you the prototype version. And we'll do all of this stuff next week so that you know how to view the prototype, but so that you can actually see it scroll. Okay. But today we're just gonna do the design part of it. Next week, we'll do the actual fun stuff. So click on your frame tool. And we're going to use iPhone 14 Pro. I'm going to rename it menu. And enter. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see it better. And click on the text, because we're going to have a title that says menu. And when I click, I'm going to type menu. Click outside of it to select the whole text box. And then change where mine says button text. I'm going to change it to screen title. And then I'm also going to change my fill style to our branded Capriccio green, just so we can kind of keep that same feel throughout our screens. I have not found a way to have a text style and a color style apply at the same time. If you do, let me know. I think that would be really helpful. But we're also going to just center this. You can either do that by clicking this align horizontal center, or yeah, horizontal centers, or you can click and drag to find that red midline. Another text thing, if you want to activate your grids for this frame, you click on menu, this layout grid style, click the 4-column one. This will allow us to better place our headline. I'm going to add a new text box using the T tool, and it's going to say cold drinks. Click outside of it to select the whole text box. I'm going to unlink my screen title style over here. And then I'm going to change it from semi-bold to medium, and from 32 to 27, which is not an option, but if you click within there in that box where there's 32, you can directly type the number. And then click enter. And then I'm just going to move it so that that aligns with my left margin. Again, this is kind of personal choice. So now we're going to have our first cold drink on the menu as an Americano, one of my favorites. So if you right click on your canvas, you can also go to the Figma icon and hover over plugins, click on Unsplash, which we ran before. And I'm just going to search for an Americano. And you can pick whatever picture you want to use in your design. I'm going to pick this one looks kind of nice. So I'm just going to click and drag it into my canvas. And again, it does it so big. So I had space barred minus to zoom out. Yeah.
Sorry, how do you find that image again?
Yeah. So were you here when we did plugins before?
No.
Okay. So if you either right click in your canvas or you click on this Figma icon, and then there's under plugins, you'll do find more plugins and then search for Unsplash, which is this one right here. And then when you click run, you can search for whatever image you want to use. So I'm going to click on my new image. I'm going to hold down Shift and drag to scale it down to something that's a little bit easier to see. And then I'm going to hold space bar and the plus button to zoom back in. Then we need to create that shape. If you notice when I was kind of previewing what we were going to do, there was a circle that we're using. So how you do that is the ellipse tool that's under your rectangle or your shape, whatever's there. Choose the ellipse. You can click and drag to create one, hold Shift to make it a perfect circle. I'm going to make it 79. And then click and drag it over your image. And you can place it wherever.
It doesn't have to be bigger than the cup, right?
No. Yeah. Yeah, the circle should be whatever size you want to be shown. So we're going to use what's called masking. So this is going to make sure that the image is essentially only showing whatever is going to be in that size of the circle. So now make sure that your circle is beneath your image. So I place it on top, but to move it beneath, you can either do that command left bracket like we did before, or you can click on it and just drag it underneath in the layers panel. I'm clicking and I'm going to move it underneath, and you'll see that it kind of goes away. It's still selected, but it's beneath your image. With it selected, hold down Shift and click on your image in your layers panel, or you can click on the image in your canvas. But make sure both are selected.
What's the like for the circle?
Mhm.
Do you want them to be colored or not?
There needs to be a color on it. Yeah. It doesn't matter what color it is, but there does need to be a fill. And then if you right click or like control click if you're on Mac, there's this option, use as mask. And when you click it, you'll notice that the only part of that image that shows is the circle. But you'll notice mine looks a little bad. You don't see the whole coffee. You can still change the image size. So if I were to click on the image, it's still there. And I can still move it around, click and drag it. I can still resize it. So I can place it exactly how I want it to be. Yeah. Yes. So if you have your image, let me do this. Oh. You have your image. Create your circle shape. You can place it on top of it for now. Move the circle underneath the picture. So you can either click on it and then just drag it down, or you can hold down, you're on PC, right? It would be, I think it's Control and then the left square bracket, I think. Yeah, so if you go to the help button and then you click on keyboard shortcuts, and then under arrange, you'll see all the shortcuts for a PC. Mine shows Mac because I'm using a Mac. But as long as your circle is beneath your image, hold down Shift to select both. Right click on it. You can also go Figma object and then use as mask. And then that will create the mask. Yeah.
Can you make the actual site for the layout lines?
Yeah, you can change it, but if you click the frame and then you can click the eye icon to toggle it on and off. I'm gonna delete this extra one. So when you click on it now, it should select the whole mask group. This makes sure it just moves kind of as its own object. And you can place it wherever you want. I'm gonna try to align it a bit better. I want them to be somewhat centered. So I'm actually gonna use the gutters as my guide. So I'm gonna try to have it where it's essentially centered with that gutter, but that's just what I'm doing. All right. So now, generally you would create multiple different versions of this so that you had different items. We're just gonna duplicate this a bunch so you can see how to create that scrolling effect. First, I'm gonna create another text box to label this as an Americano. I'm gonna click outside and I'm just gonna change some of the font styling choices again. I'm gonna do this as medium is fine. Outfit's fine. I'm gonna put this at 15. So it kind of matches a little bit better. And then when you like move it around, it should be able to show you an orange line when it's centered with your image. With the text box selected, hold down Shift and select your image mask with your coffee image. Command G or Control G to group it. And I'm just going to name the group Americana. So like we've been doing before, where we hold down Alt or Option and we click and drag to create multiple, let's do that with this. Let's do 5 more. Okay. So I'm holding down Option. If you're on PC, use Alt and just kind of click and drag to create multiple. You'll notice that as I'm doing this, I'm seeing that there's 16 pixels between each. So I'm going to try to keep that pretty standard. But you'll notice they start to go off my frame. So it's a little bit harder because it doesn't have anything to relate to. But
Wait, how do I make the next Americano with the name?
you group it. So you selected the image, hold down Shift and select the text, and then Command G. Now go through each one, click it, hold down Shift, click the next one, and keep doing that till you have all 6 collected or selected. And actually first, sorry, we have to move these 2 that are off the frame, move them to be on the frame. So I selected it in the layers panel, hold down Shift to select the other. I'm going to drag it underneath menu. You'll notice they disappear. That's because they're not in the frame size. The frame can only show what's on its size. Then over here, you can select, I'm missing one. There we go. So if you hold down, if you click on the first one on the top, you can click Shift and then click on the one on the bottom. It'll select them all for you. Just a neat little trick. And then we're going to use what's called an auto layout, which is over here. So auto layout does a little bit of like AI kind of stuff where it tries to determine how things should look on the screen for you. But this is how we emulate that scrolling behavior. So we'll click the plus. And now these are all in their own frame. You'll notice that over here, there's frame 1. And if you expand it, there's all of our different Americanos. So are all of your items in the frame?
I just want to look at what you did, like, I just looked at it.
So now there's a bunch of different settings in auto layout. The first one is these arrows. So right now it's horizontal layout, so it's going to put every item horizontally for me. If I click vertical, move them up and down. So I don't have to move all of these items individually now. I could just change it like this if I wanted. There's this horizontal spacing between items. You'll notice there's like a little bit of a pink border between all of my different ones. If I were to increase, I could change how far each one is from each other and stuff like that. But I'm going to set it back to 16. Horizontal padding is going to add or remove from the sides. So when we clicked auto layout, it created a frame exactly the width of our selection. But if you wanted there to be some room on the sides, this is how you do it. With your horizontal padding, you can also do a vertical padding as well. This is essentially so if you want like other elements to not bump up against your items, but we're placing things, you know, specifically ourselves. So this doesn't really matter in this use case. But if you're going to use multiple items more than just this in a auto layout, then you probably want something like that. Yeah.
So how did you get the frame?
Yeah, so this one I selected under the frame menu, all of my Americanos I selected. And then there's it doesn't show it now, but there was a auto layout thing. This. Let me take a look. Yeah. Yeah, so make sure that all of your Americanos are under the menu frame. And then I've been noticing with some others, like there's a blue icon right about in the bottom right of the selection that has like 3 white lines. You might need to click that. So just a little preview of what we're going to do next week. To actually do that horizontal scrolling behavior, you need to go to that prototype tab. And we'll play with it more, but you'll notice it says overflow scrolling. And I could change this to horizontal scrolling. And then that makes it so that when I'm actually using my okay, we can fix that to actually scroll. With this frame selected, the auto layout frame, make sure that you have this clip content selected, and then move the frame to just be for the 3. So that's my bad for forgetting about that. So if we go back, we have our auto layout frame. When we click clip content, this makes sure that you can resize your frame, but you don't actually lose anything. It's just not shown in the frame itself. So when I move this down, you'll notice that this item kind of disappears in the thing. So once I have it put to the size that I want to be visible, which you can do kind of whatever size you want. Over in prototype, under overflow scrolling, change it to horizontal scrolling. That makes sure that we can simulate swiping left and right. Vertical would be up and down. Vertical and horizontal would be kind of every which way. Cool. Any questions? Okay. We're gonna try to quickly go through making a navigation menu for the bottom so that you can click, but if we don't finish it, that's fine. My plan for next week, I'm going to make all of these components and variants and stuff for you, publish it to the Figma community, and then at the start of next week, I'll show you how you can navigate to that and make a copy so that you can play around with it yourself with the prototype settings. If you want to take the time and mock up your entire app so that you can play around with the prototyping, that's cool, but I'm not going to force you to do outside homework. So we're going to build that navigation menu with the icons. So I'm going to scroll over to my board. And a thing with Iconify that's a little interesting is it puts your icons as frames. So if you just click the icon and you move it, you might move it outside of the frame and disconnect it. So just kind of best practice is always search for that name of the frame and click and move it. If you don't have the Iconify plugin installed, again, that's a right click or a Figma plugins, find more plugins, and then search for Iconify and run it. So I'm going to actually run it again, and we're going to find some more icons for us to use. Particularly, I want to have a kind of like about page.
How do we make the icon?
Yeah, so you can select the frame, and then you can just click and drag it. You can also change the height and the width over here. But I'm going to keep it at 24. Pretty small bit. So if I run Iconify, I did that by right-clicking, plugins, Iconify. I'm going to search for an about page. I like this one. I'm going to search for a locations icon, or maybe location will give me better options. This one's pretty cool. I'm going to find one for menu. And you can pick whatever icons you want. These are just personal preference that I'm doing. And then there's also going to be a cart because we want people to be able to view their cart and purchase and stuff like that. And this one's fine. And then maybe like a contact page. And this one's cool. So now I have all of my icons. And I'm going to want them to be in an actual menu. So that's a rectangle. So under the shape tool, we have rectangle. You can just click and drag it because we want it to span the sides of our frame. We want it to be from the very left to the very right. So if I click the loading screen, I can just see that an iPhone 14 Pro has a width of 393 pixels. So I can click on my rectangle, click within the width, and then just type 393. And that makes sure it's the length of my screen. I'm going to also change my height to actually be able to contain our icons. I'm going to change it to 60. That's big, actually. Let's do 50. So then I am going to click and hold down the shift on all of these different icon names to select all of them. You can also do that over here in the layers panel with all of these frame, and then it's MDI material, something like that. Selection colors is a really nice way to change colors. So this is saying that I've only selected things with the color black, because I only see one color. If I click on it and I start changing it, it'll change all of those blacks to a different color. So I'm going to change them all to white. Doesn't look great with this gray background, but we'll fix that. I'm going to change my rectangle color to fit my theme. So I'm going to use a fill style of our Capriccio green. And then I'm going to click again to select. I'm doing this in a little not very quick manner. If I plan this better, it would be fine. But then I'm going to click and move them to be by the rectangle. Hold down shift with the rectangle. Oh, that deselected everything. So I'm just going to go back and select all my things. I'm missing one. All the way at the bottom for some reason. Gonna group them. Gonna name the group navigation menu. With the whole group selected, I can use my align horizontal centers or my align vertical centers. Horizontal will make them all on top of each other, so that's not really the greatest. But vertical will make them so that they're all centered like evenly, up and down. I'm going to click and drag my rectangle to be below all of my icons. Nope, not within that one. So as you like click and move your layers, you can like nest them within each other. So if you do like I just did, and I put it within the home frame, you can just click and drag to move it up by moving it to the left. So I'm gonna then select this frame. I'm gonna move it to the left to be somewhere. I'm gonna select the one on the way right.
They were grouped together. How can you still change each one?
Yep, so you can either click on the group and then double click within to get to the individual item, or you can click on the individual item in your layers tab. I'm going to move this one to the right. And I'm going to select them all. Again, go under this more options menu in our alignment and distribute horizontal spacing so that they're equally spaced out. So I know that was super quick. It's kind of some things that we did before, but now we have a somewhat decent navigation menu.
Where is horizontal space?
Yep. So that would be under, if you have them all selected, under this more options menu, there's distribute horizontal spacing. All right. That is my time. Any last questions? Okay, yeah, you don't need to. This is not graded or anything like that.
We have time next week to do it.
I can run through it again next week, yeah. Okay, yeah. Let me just stop this recording.